Hello, I'm Miranda, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Johanna to talk about nutrient circulation. We've been working on a public project for some time now, over in Saltvik on the Åland Islands of Finland, to improve and increase nutrient circulation in the local community. And what we've found is that many people aren't very aware of nutrient circulation, its importance in the community, and also the effects that it can have when nutrient circulation is disrupted. So that's our aim today, is to really start to demystify nutrient circulation. So perhaps we'll start there just by talking about what is nutrient circulation and why is it important?
First of all, if we start with what are we talking about when we're talking about nutrients? Obviously there are many nutrients, but when we're talking about the context of food production, the nutrients that we zoom in on when we're talking about nutrients are phosphorus and nitrogen. And the reason for zooming in on these two, while there are so many other nutrients that plants need to grow, the reason for these two is that they become a problem, or they cause problems when they leak out of the system, when they leak out of soil and end up in waterways. So they end up causing algae blooms and things like that. So that's why when we talk about nutrients in the context of food production and getting nutrients to circulate better, what we're talking about is phosphorus and nitrogen.
And speaking of food production, it's important to note that modern practices and methods have disrupted nature's natural circulation of nutrients. Quite often, a nutrient cycle is referred to as nature's own recycling system of nutrients and works in quite a circular way.
I mean, nature has a lovely system of, it's a cycle. So where shall we begin? Let's begin in the soil. We've got nitrogen and phosphorus stored in the soil, and the plants take that up through their roots and use that to grow. And then they grow, and then the plants die, or they drop leaves and plant matter, and that ends up back on the ground, and it starts decaying, and it goes back into the soil and releases the nutrients back again into the soil, the nitrogen and phosphorus. And also it adds to the organic matter in the soil. And on it goes, this cycle. And that's the way things happen in the nature. Things grow, they die, they end up back into the soil, and the cycle begins again. So that's a very natural way of doing it. But what we've done with the food system, the industrial food system, is that we've kind of interrupted that, and we need to have inputs added to the system. So we need to add phosphorus and nitrogen into the system, because there's not, or we think that there's not enough in the system. And then also, we're kind of preventing the normal cycle from completing. We're not leaving perhaps the rotting or the decaying plant matter and manure. We're not letting manure or taking manure back to the soil or something like that. So we're kind of not doing the natural things, or the things that the natural cycle would include, that would take the nutrients back to the soil. And then we have to add sort of man-made fertilizers to the soil. So it's not a cycle, it's a linear system that we've created.
Yes, and it's so important for people to be aware of, that we are actually actively putting those nutrients back into the soil, when in fact, when the nutrient cycle is supported and functioning well, those nutrients can arrive through the normal cycle and the normal functioning of the system. When we're trying to reduce our sustainability footprint and our production, it seems a bit crazy that we are making products such as fertilizers to put those or replenish those nutrients back in the soil. So we talked about the impact on food production, but also the algae blooms. What other kind of impacts do we get from the nutrient cycle when it's not functioning as it should?
Well, that's really the big problem, is that when these nutrients end up in the waterways, into our rivers and lakes and seas and oceans, and they are adding too much nutrients in there, and that's causing things like algae bloom. So that's really the big problem. But of course, we are also sort of being inefficient with the system, because we're allowing valuable nutrients to run out of the system, whereas we should be making sure that we retain those nutrients and we keep them circulating within the system. So we're being kind of wasteful and inefficient in our way of operating, that we need to add more nutrients in, and then at the other end we allow them to leak out. So it's not ideal in an sort of, if we're thinking from the efficiency point of view or economic point of view, it's not ideal.
No, not ideal at all, particularly when we look at creating circular systems or solutions ourselves. Here we have a situation where there is value leaking out from one of nature's inherent circular systems. So, not ideal at all. So, then let's talk briefly about who's involved in getting nutrient circulation going and getting the natural system back on track. We've found that for some people, the term nutrient circulation feels like it's something that needs to be addressed and supported by industry, government, or business. But as we know from our own experience in the Saltvic project, it also needs to be activated by eaters, all of us as eaters of food.
Yeah, that's right. It's really it's not something that any individual part of the food system can fix, but it's really a concerted effort. We all need to, and can, that's the positive thing, we all can chip in and do our part. So if we're just if we're starting from what we all are, we're eaters of food. So we can make sure that we're not producing food waste, so being very efficient with our food and mindful with our food, so we're not wasting anything. And when we do have bio waste happening, we make sure that that ends up where it should end up, that it's not going into the mixed waste, but it's going into, whether you're composting yourself or you put it in a municipal waste, bio waste collection or whatever, but making sure that it ends up where it should end up, so that it can be utilized as nutrients again. So that's really really the important thing that all of us as eaters can do. And then the other parts of the system, there's so many things that can happen there, like retail. Similarly to households, retail can make sure that they're very efficient with not producing food waste, and being very um, sort of efficient with their ordering system and storage and whatever, so that there is as little food waste as possible. And of course also the role of sort of informing people on how to interpret best before dates or use by dates on products and things like that, so that people know when things are still sort of usable, even if it's past its sort of prime date and things like that. And really the industry, then, if we're thinking about food companies, a lot of things can be done with side streams. Quite
Mm.
often, I would say very, very often, there are some kinds of side streams from production activities. There's nutrients embedded in there. What can we do with the side streams? How can they be utilized? Or how can we retain the value within those? And then, of course, the farming side, which we already talked about, and how there are many initiatives there that can make the nutrient cycle more sort of mimicking how it is in the nature, instead of going with this linear system.
Yes, and on value, it's worth noting what we've seen through the SaltVic project, that getting eaters or everyday people involved and increasing their awareness of nutrient circulation and the types of actions that they can take, such as reducing their food waste, better food storage, and also smarter shopping, so only buying what you need and not excessively buying food, can have some real value points for the everyday person in terms of cost savings, reducing waste that they need to manage themselves, and many other benefits also.
Yeah, absolutely. This really is a win-win-win kind of a situation, I think, from the point of view of us as eaters, and the economy and the nature. So it works for all of us if we make an effort to allow it to work.
Very true, Johanna. Well, great to talk about nutrient circulation and start to demystify what this is all about and its importance. And we will come back to nutrient circulation, looking into deeper aspects of it in the future.